Indewo, Indiebo. I am Bo, Bishop T.D. Jakes. Anam na BBC News Igbo. To the Igbo people, I'm deeply delighted and grateful to have this opportunity to spend a few moments sharing with you. And learning more about you has been something that has fascinated me very much.
All right. So we are delighted to have you on our platform, and we just want to ask, how did this whole Igbo thing come about? We heard in the news some time back that you traced your roots to be from the Igbo people. How did that come about? Why did you even go that far to start tracing your roots?
So it all started when Henry Louis Gates, who was at Harvard, decided to do this DNA testing to see where my ancestry came from. And so it was me, it was Oprah Winfrey, it was Quincy Jones and several other people who participated in the initial study. And mine traced back to Western Africa and to Nigeria in particular, and Igbo were my ancestors were Igbos. And so it was fascinating. And oddly enough, I was the only one that was tested that was full-blooded African.
Wow. Wow. So how did that
That's
make you
very
feel?
rare.
How did that make you feel?
Oh, it's indescribable. Yeah, it gives us something that we as African American people don't have, which is roots. As Alex Haley would say, it gave me a better understanding of my roots. It's very interesting how similar I am personality wise to how Igbo people are described. It explains some things to me about myself that was very fascinating. And my sons and my daughters have all started studying ancestry and about Igbos and about more and more about Africa as I like to say, close the middle passage and reconnect with our brothers and sisters from over there.
All right. So, do you have like a direct connection, or maybe you have someone that introduces you to how Igbo people do things? Do you have someone you are in direct connection with that is Igbo?
Everybody who's Igbo that I run into in America will always talk to me and teach me little things that help me to understand. Lacan has been quite helpful, and I'm still in the learning process, but I find it all very, very fascinating.
Great. So, what's the most fascinating thing you have seen about Igbo people? I know you have done deep research on them. So, what is it that you have found about Igbo people that you are happy about to be identified with them?
Well, they're described as being hardworking and industrious, innovative, with a strong business acumen. I deeply relate to that. Uh, Upwardly mobile people, progressive in their thinking. It explained me to me. It's odd that I was never born there, and yet I see so many traces of that. I've always been entrepreneurial. I've always had a strong business acumen. I've always been aggressive in business as well as in faith. And though I'm more well known over there for the faith aspect of it, I own several companies. I've always had my own resources, and it just explained the way that I think to me.
Okay, so did you finding out that you are Igbo have any effects on you as a person and the way you do things? Did it have like any impact on you?
Well, my great grandmother was born a slave. She died when I was 10 years old. And so our family stories had passed down from the moments the boat landed. And this just confirmed what our family story had verbally and in writing form been passed down to us as well. I think it gives you, it, it's hard to explain the hole that fills up to, to know a little bit more about where you came from. One of the terrible tragedies of the transatlantic slave trade is not just that we were taken from our home and from our culture and from our people and from our food, but we lost our history. And history, African American history, is taught over here from the times the boat landed. And then we assumed a name that does not define us. So Jakes is actually a German name, and it only signifies who owned my ancestors. So to reach beyond the boats and beyond the chains and to touch a soil where I came from and was in fact free, and to understand that my ancestors were something before they were a slave, is extremely gratifying, and really confirms why I have such fascination with the continent of Africa and always have. My whole house is decorated with African art. I always wanted to see what success looked like in my color. And in this country, that growing up as a boy, that was a rarity. And so most of my house has African art in it. I often wear African attire. About us when I preach, I find them very comfortable. I have all kinds of them, and people send them to me from everywhere. So I often preach in them, and I have a huge following in Lagos, Nigeria, and even above Dallas, and then Nairobi, Kenya, and then Atlanta. So it's pretty global, but I have a strong constituency in South Africa and Mozambique, and so we talk back and forth. So when I'm in Nigeria, I experience the food, and so I'll eat the fufu and the jollof rice and have those kinds of experiences, and it's really nice to me, really nice.
Okay, let's talk about the food you have had in Nigeria. Can you, aside the food, what soup have you had in there? Have you had like local Igbo made food?
Oh, I probably had more than I can name, because I go to Ghana quite often, Accra, and I go to Lagos quite often, and some of it I don't even know the names of. What I have learned about the food is that it is almost always hot and spicy, and and so I've been trying to duplicate the spice. You cannot find that particular type of spice in the United States. So now I'm trying to get our oxtail to taste like yours.
Oh, big Oscar now.
Yeah. But the thing about it, I ate it before, but oxtail over there, it's so hot it makes your head sweat. And I liked it. You know, I liked it. So I'm trying to imitate it. I haven't been able to do it, but I try.
Right. All right. So let's talk about the governance in Africa. And I don't know if you follow the politics in Africa, in Nigeria particularly.
Just a little.
Okay. So if you follow it, you would know that the Igbo people have been fighting for secession from Nigeria. And if you, there was the civil war in 1967, that's like 50 years ago. And
Yes.
since the civil war, the Igbo people have been trying to fight for self-determination for their own state in Nigeria. And I wanted to know if what you think about the whole scenario, watching from outside and looking at what is going on and the whole agitation by the Igbo people, what you think about it, and how the Igbo people are managing the whole situation. If what do you think?
Uh, I would be reluctant to go too far in giving advice on a political matter of that magnitude. I think it's very, very important that the people who address it are the people who live in that environment. Having said that, I still think that every people need to have representation on the highest level of government, whether that is through a democracy that includes representation for all people, or whether that is independence is to be determined by the people themselves. But I deeply respect and understand that there is a passion amongst many Igbos to recede from Nigeria and to develop their own influence and culture and so forth. And I think that we are still grappling with the after effects of colonialism, and trying to my understanding of colonialism, you had superimposed upon you one way of looking at yourselves that were totally different from how you had seen yourselves before, and consequently colonialism in some ways affected you like slavery did us, and so we're still trying to untangle ourselves from the after effects of some of the atrocities that did not dignify us with a deeper understanding of how we choose to see ourselves. They were more interested in the land than the people. And so they divided up the land at the expense of the people. And I think we're still trying to overcome that. And I say we because we were there too. And at the end of the day, we need to find a way to re-understand ourselves beyond white supremacy and dominance and colonialism, and reconnect as a African family, regardless to what tribe we are.
So, how do you perceive governance in Africa generally, not particular to Nigeria now? Governance in Africa, in East Africa, West Africa, North Africa, and South Africa.
There has been a struggle there. You know, there has been a struggle here in having the kind of governance that really makes the inroads that we would like to see made for the everyday person. I am heartened and encouraged by some of the presidents over there who have extended to African Americans in recognition of the 1619 and the 400 years of slavery, the welcome mat of coming home. There are some interesting discussions being had about waiving visas and giving dual citizenship, which is deeply meaningful. I cannot even explain to you how deeply meaningful that is to many African Americans. And I think that consequently you will see a greater influx of African Americans who are actually moving into places like Ghana and Nigeria and even into Kenya and different places like that. And it is because it is starting to be perceived that we are welcome there. And that is to a people who have been homeless for 400 years in so many ways. That gives you a sense of identity beyond your national borders. I'm proud to be an American. I love this country, but because of the history and the way that we came here, my culture is not always celebrated here. So to have the culture celebrated and to have the opportunity to have some duality is quite fulfilling.
So, would you want to have Nigerian citizenship?
Would I want to what?
Would you want to be a citizen of Nigeria, be given citizenship? Would you want to even apply for a citizenship if you would you want to do that?
What I would like to see, I think whatever presidents open up the door where they provide dual citizenships for African Americans is definitely going to get a response. Because I travel back and forth over there quite often, it would simplify the whole process. And to be honest with you, there's a huge opportunity for Africans of all parts of the continent and African Americans to come together for business, for prosperity. I was planning to host at Martha's Vineyard, which is an area where a lot of prominent African Americans meet in August. I was planning to host this year a intercontinental summit for Africans, Caribbean leaders, and African Americans to discuss ways in which we can do business, we can trade, we can close the Middle Passage and reconnect as an African family. And I think from a business and economic perspective, the time is now. And it is accentuated by the fact that we have the kind of technology that makes it possible for me to be sitting in Dallas, Texas, and talking to you in Nigeria. That was an opportunity our parents and our grandparents did not have. But I don't think that we are using those opportunities to their fullest capacity to create trade and aid and assistance and cultural awareness. And sometimes when we are dealing with pandemics such as the types that we are dealing with now, it creates an opportunity for us to have dialogue. We have adopted a hospital in Kenya, and we're able to send ventilators to that hospital. We have more reasons to be together than we do to be divided. We have dug quite a few boreholes in different parts of Africa and built houses, particularly in South Africa. I think we are better
together than we are apart.
But there's that movement now in America specifically where some people are saying some people are more African than others. Some people are black. I don't know if you have come across that. So there's
Sure.
that divide amongst the African American and the Africans now, where African Americans are saying that, you know what, Africans didn't go through what we went through, and they can't come here and be who we are or take our space. This is our space. So, and you're now seeing the fight between brothers, people that are supposed to work together, make things work. There's that divide, there's that struggle, and we are making each other uncomfortable. How do you see that?
I think that is fading away. I think that education and information and conversations like this help to dispel uh, some of the biases that are inherent. I would want your audience to know that we are not monolithic, that all African Americans do not think the same, no more than all Nigerians think the same. And so the comments of a few do not represent the sentiments of us all. And the final thing that I think is a very strong conduit is I think that the church has a tremendous opportunity to be a bridge. We sing each other's music. We wear each other's clothes. We have a deep. Let me tell you something. Every African American I know went to see Black Panther, and you can't tell them that there's not a Wakanda somewhere in Africa. So and they all were dressed in African clothes. So the tension is not nearly as thick as you would think. Or we wouldn't have been in every theater in America dressed in African clothes saying Wakanda forever. So we need something that you have, and you need something that we have. As technology progresses and there's a greater demand for example, for workforce. And Africa has some of the largest amounts of emerging workforce of any other continent in the world, young people who can fulfill the demand for STEM jobs. Over the next 15 years or so, 80% of the jobs in this country are going to be in the area of STEM and STEAM. And so we have an opportunity to do it. We listen at your music. You watch us on YouTube. I don't think that there is as much animosity or division as is perpetuated by the media.
All right, just to take you back a little bit to what you said earlier about governments being open for dual citizenship. Before that, having found out where your roots from, where you are from, your ancestors, where they are from, would you advise other African Americans who are confused as well about where they are actually coming from to go the same routes that you took?
Not only that, not only do I think that they need to know their entire story, that it does something for your identity and your self-esteem, much like Jews do in their understanding of Israel. No matter where they are in the world, there's still some solidarity they have to where they came from. In that same sense, I think we benefit by making those connections. Several years ago, you will remember that I had a mega fest in South Africa, and I brought 5 plane loads of African Americans to South Africa for the very first time. Several years before that, I was in Kenya and brought our choir on a plane. And it was the first time that almost 90% of them had ever set foot in Africa. And you have to understand that most African Americans don't know what to imagine when you say Africa. Their ideas about Africa are images that they see on TV. And so the more that we can do to show images that update their understanding of where they came from, the more likely you are to see a greater participation of African Americans choosing various parts of Africa, exploring it as vacation sites and possible second homes.
All right. So a lot of Africans are actually moving to America, to the West, for greener pastures. Want to stay there and not come back to Africa. So would you advise Africans to stay home, or at least come back home when they get what they are looking for outside there so that Africa can be better for you that are trying to come home or trying to look back at your roots to have something to come back to?
I think that the more that we explore each other, the better we are as a civilization. I think it's good for us to come there. I think it's good for them to come here. I think people who are well traveled tend to be much more intelligent. As to where you end up, it depends on the economic fluctuations, the medical fluctuations, and the opportunities that exist. Much like early civilizations built cities around waters, people build community around opportunities. I do think that opportunities are emerging in Africa. And even though that there's been a downturn in recent times economically, I think that that emergence will prevail over top of the temporary downturns in the market, in the economy, in the value of the economic exchange between the dollar rate and the rand and the various dollar rates that exist over there. To say to them that they should come home is to place a guilt trip on people that should be free. I think that we should go where we want to go. And I certainly would not exempt Africa as an option. But people generally build civilization throughout history around opportunities. And the greater the opportunity, the greater likelihood there is to see an influx of Africans returning and African Americans coming.
So, how do you think that governments, African governments, they are doing? How do you think they are faring in trying to create these opportunities you're talking about for Africans so that they can at least create a civilization that people need to remain in Africa and keep bringing Africa to the world?
I think the big challenge for leaders over there is to benefit from their associations with the West and the East without being cannibalized by it. I think that every time I go over there, the acceleration of advancement is staggering. And that staggering acceleration is a result of the ability of the leadership in the various countries to negotiate deals with other countries. But that is also true of America. We didn't get here by ourselves. We got here through trade and aid and negotiation. And when you think about the economy today, you cannot think about the economy in isolation by tribe or by nationality or by color. It is a global economy. And because it is a global economy, we are increasingly a global civilization. People are moving everywhere, flowing everywhere, as is their capital, as is their music, as is their food, as is their culture. You can't sequester anything about you and keep it within borders anymore because the borders are all torn down by technology. And I think we have to understand that in order to go forward. It is an antiquated idea, in my view, to think that we can build walls around people and isolate them and make them and harness them behind those walls when technology has torn down the walls. So we're watching Nollywood movies on Netflix, and it's the third largest producer in the world. So all of a sudden I'm watching a movie that was shot in Nollywood, and I'm sitting up watching it in Dallas. And that's for your betterment. So even in business, to say to business, you only do business right here. You do business where there's opportunities. We seek to do business with Nollywood because I'm a film producer. And so anytime you're a film producer, you want to go wherever there is an audience and wherever there is a demand. We've had African artists to sing on our stage from different parts of the continent. You're never going to untangle us. We were one before. And so I think that you have to be prepared to let people explore the planet, and where in order to get them to come back, you can't make them feel guilty into coming back. You have to create opportunities for them to want to come back to.
All right, you have been to Africa in different parts. You have toured Africa a lot, and the representation of Africa that we have in the Western media is not what we Africans love to see. So how can we change that story? The kind of picture they paint for people in America, for people in the West about Africa, it's so one-sided that it's it's not what we want to see. So how can we change that story?
I think that one of the greatest and smartest things that has been done was Nollywood. Because now you control the images that we see. Now you get to tell your own story. When you look at Nollywood, it's the same thing that Tyler Perry Studios represents to African Americans. When you own your own studio, you can tell your own story. And then we get a broader perspective of who you are. None of us are going to accept the words of our leaders about who another country is. We accept what we see, and people believe, as Confucius said, a picture is better than 1,000 words. You've now got the pictures, and you're now negotiating deals with American companies because we cannot think in isolation and segregate our economy or our health. When you look at COVID, irrespective of what color or country you come from, it attacks us all. In the same way, our economies are affected by each other. We cannot become so tribal in our thinking that we do it to the disintegration of the opportunities that come through trade and interconnectivity. That's what I think.
All right. So you talk about women a lot. You talk about, and you just released your I don't know if you released that. I was looking at your Instagram page, When Women Pray.
It's about to be released. Yes.
Yeah, and I read The Woman, Her Lover, and Her Lord. You have loads of materials and loads of books for women. What role do you think women should be playing in today's world, especially in Africa and in Nigeria, if I may say, where I am? What role do you think women should be playing in trying to make things right, trying to direct the society the much they can, and uplift the society from where it is to where we are hoping it's going to?
History teaches us that the way a society treats its women has a lot to do with how progressive it is. The more progressive a society becomes, it is reflected in the liberation of the woman. And I think that is a very important thing to understand, that we have women who are on spaceships going up in the Apollo, that they're campaigning to be presidents around the world and vice presidents and entering into new occupational territories that were once taboo for them. They're on the basketball court. They're doing all types of things. I don't think that a gender should restrict a mind. It's the brain we want. It's the thought power. And I think that we can do that and still hold on to your femininity and your family life, and your family role in your business life are two different things. And so I've always been a great advocate for promoting and encouraging women to explore themselves. The adage, he who rocks the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. The reason we want smart, progressive women is because smart, progressive women produce smart, progressive children. And so society flourishes much more aptly when the mother is bright and empowered and her voice is respected and heard. It affects how her daughter sees herself. It affects how her son treats his wife.
Wow, that's very powerful. All right, let's go back a little bit to your Igbo identity. So, do you identify yourself now as an Igbo American? do you have you adopted an Igbo name yet?
No, I have been given. I cannot even pronounce it, but I have been given an Igbo name.
Can you spell it?
No, I can't even spell it for you. But I have not identified myself as an Igbo American. I still identify myself as an African American, but I'm very quick to tell people that my ancestors were Nigerian, and they came from Africa, and it wasn't even Nigeria at the time, so they came from West Africa more aptly, and they were Igbos. I will tell you in a minute. And the reason I'll tell you that in a minute is because I'm very proud to have that question answered over my life. But it has not changed how I fill out forms or documentation or my citizenships or things like that. What it has done is healed a hole that I didn't know I had. I think the strength of answering that question, whether you're Igbo or Yoruban or Kikuyu or whatever, to have that answer is therapeutic, mentally, intellectually, and even spiritually. I was floating down the Volta River in Ghana, just at dusk, and the smoke-filled villages were scenting the air, and I was floating on a boat, and it was indescribable, the beauty of it, the sounds of the nature. It's I tried to capture it. I've tried to bring it home. I've tried to teach people here. I've tried to be a voice in America for African Americans and white Americans who don't know about Africa, because there's a great deal of ignorance here about Africa. They just don't know. And I apologize for every ignorant thing that we have ever said or done. They just don't know. It's not taught in our schools like that. And we don't know, but we want to know, and we want to understand, and we want to perceive, and we are as curious about you as you are about us, and maybe more so. And so I think that's why the summit I was holding was very important, because when we organically get to work together, whether it is with a company like Goldman Sachs, or whether it is through trade, or whether it is through church, when we organically find out what we have in common, what connects us rather than what divides us, it dispels myths, it educates on both sides of the water, and it creates a brotherhood and a sense of family. I mean, you met Lacan, who is my chief of communications, and he's I'm American. I'm American. Don't give up on me. I grew up in West Virginia, but he having that multicultural wall around me is a reflection of what I respect and what I think. I did not hire him because of his ethnicity. I hired him because of his efficiency. But I am proud to have that diversity on my staff and on my team.
That's great. So you have been to Nigeria a lot of times, and I am not sure you have been to Igbo land itself, have you?
I was in Warri.
Worry, you're coming close.
I'm coming close. Okay, you have to tell me when I get there. I was in Warri. I was in the capital of Nigeria, Abuja. Yeah, I was in Abuja. That's where my mouth caught on fire with the oxtail and the white rice in Abuja. uh, and I have met a lot of Igbo people, even here, and they go out of their way to come up and talk to me, and tell me things and teach me things. And but I don't know that I've been in the heart of Igbo land. So if Warri didn't get me there, beyond Lagos, Warri, and Abuja, that's the only places I've been in Nigeria to date.
All right. So, are you looking forward to visiting an Igbo place? We call it Ali Igbo, like the Igbo land. Are you looking forward to doing that anytime?
I am looking forward to doing that, and I'm looking forward to experiencing it and learning about it. I was in a church service, and an Igbo person said to me, "This is what your language sounds like." And they started speaking in their language. And even though I couldn't understand it, it was deeply moving to me. 400 years of an atrocity that separates you from your ancestry is quite a wound to heal. And I think sometimes that people from the continent are so busy in Africa, are so busy trying to get what they don't have, that they don't celebrate what they do have. And that I find what they do have to be very valuable and to be very relevant. And I think that if we share the strengths of both worlds, we are better. We are much better. I've got all the pastors over here are now dressing like I dress, you know. So we are watching each other, and I think that people of influence should use their influence to enhance the conversation amongst each other, and not to depend on the images that we see through the media to teach us about who we are as a African family.
Wow. All right. So we are rounding off now. What's the two questions? What's the greatest feeling you have had being an African American and tracing your roots back? And what advice will you give to the Igbo people, to Africans, and to your fellow African American about their roots and who they are?
It's hard to say what the greatest experience was. I think sailing down the Volta River was the one that pops up into my mind. But every time I go, it's like going to college for me. Yeah, it is so fascinating. I really learned so much, and to sit around smart people and listen at them talk and us exchange with each other is the finest meal I've ever eaten. It's just to dine at the table of all of our cultural distinctives. And so I think that is important. My hope for the Igbo people, for the African people, for all people, is that as superpowers come in and add so much technology and advancement, that the culture is not snuffed out in the process, and that you understand that ownership is critical in the deals that you make around the world. If you only sell and you don't own, you'll soon be not a people at all, because ownership for all people is a sign of upward mobility. And I hope that in the negotiations, better wages are negotiated into the deal. Better opportunities for upward mobility for millions of young Africans I see who are trained and equipped and need opportunities. On the other hand, there are hundreds of thousands of jobs in the U.S. that need those intellectual properties. And so we've got to find a way to bridge this gap so that people can eat and live and educate and grow effectively. If we don't learn how to dwell together as brethren, we will die together as individuals.
Your business interests in Africa, where are they located? Do you have any plans for Nigeria at all?
Yeah, well, I'm looking at the whole continent, and I'm not looking at it necessarily at particular countries, but where there are opportunities, particularly real estate opportunities for community development, for workforce housing, particularly interested in working with either affluent people who want to partner, or government officials who are concerned about increasing workforce housing. We can do any type of housing. We can also collaborate on bringing retail, hotels, things like that into areas if the conditions and the circumstances are correct. I'm the CEO of TD Jakes Real Estate Ventures, TDJ Rev, and we do have a global interest in extending our business far beyond our borders. We're talking in the Caribbean. We're talking a little in Kenya, and we're open to have conversations if we can facilitate a deal that enables us to either bring retail, lodging, through partnerships that we have or workforce housing into various areas of Africa. I'm very open to having those types of conversations.
How easy has it been for you doing business in Africa?
It has not been easy. It has not been easy. And one of the reasons that I want to hold the summit is to untangle it in such a way that we can do business more effectively. And I'm very interested in partnering with like-minded business people who we can get past the corruption, we can get past the red tape, and do business amongst ourselves. There's got to be a way. There's got to be a way that reasonable men can sit down at the table and we can do like other people of the world and do business, and both people walk away having their expectations met. And I think that integrity is important in success. So I'm very interested in that. And so through our foundation, for example, we do STEAM programs, which is a variation of STEM that adds arts. And we had 5,000 students from around the world to attend our virtual experience for STEAM programs. That is just an example of the things we can do. We want to bring hotel chains and workforce housing and retail opportunities and collaborative efforts if the business deals are integrous and forthright. And there are business deals to be had over there, and there are people with integrity over there. But getting through the maze when you're an outsider is quite complicated.
So in maybe 2 sentences, what is the greatest of the challenges you have faced aside this maze you're talking about? In this maze you're talking about?
Trust, honestly. Building a trust, and trust comes through relationship. And the same laws don't apply over there as they do over here. And so a lot of it boils down to trust. And there are certain things that people over there know about the business community that somebody from the outside could easily be hoodwinked, not knowing the history of the person. It's hard to do research over there. It's hard to do data acquisition over there to determine where are the best places to put the footprint. So it's not just about the trust of the people, but the land and the strategy of the cities going forward. Where is going to be the best place to put down a footprint for upward mobility? Those are the challenges. The opportunities, however, are endless. Every time I come to Africa, there's building, there's development, there's increase going on. And I think that there's a chance for us as African Americans and Africans to have a collaborative effort, because on the other hand, we don't have the racial complexities over there that we do over here. So it would be good for African Americans to be able to sit down at the table where we didn't have to fight through racism to get things done. So we would win because of that, and you would win because there are CEOs over hotels and corporations and airlines and all types of things that could add to the texture of the economic forecast for Africa. And we need to find a way to come together and clear the path and open up the door so that we can do business, and so that we can create jobs, and so that we can help each other without getting stuck in the quagmire of the loss of trust. And it's not just over there. Trust is eroding in America as well. And I think as long as our countries deteriorate in the areas of trust, money rests in trust. You put finances in a trust fund, and that's not just an accident or a play on words. Where there is no trust, there is no upward mobility. A few people will explode, but the vast majority of people will not. This cannibalizing each other's opportunities is detrimental to us on both sides of the pond. And so I want to have the kinds of conversation with trusted voices, with integrous voices, so that we can carve a pathway across the Middle Passage and be able to do things together. We have the same hair. We have the same skin. Why are we not producing our own products and sharing them amongst ourselves? We lack some of the same things. Our foods are related. Why are we not interconnecting in that way? I don't understand why there aren't more people who see the urgent need for us to connect on a business level. We connect on a spiritual level. We sing each other's songs. We listen to each other's music. If you got a blazing artist over there, we know it over here. Hip hop, everything else. When it comes to business, we have got to do better. We've got to do as good with business as we do with movies. You've got Nollywood. We're film producers over here. Why are we not collaborating together more effectively and disseminating content through technology? So all of those things are ways in which I think that we could enhance our relationship. As it relates to my literary works, I just released the book, or about to release, When Women Pray. It will be as much read in Africa as it is in America. Why can we not work together more effectively to disseminate content, material, and advertise it in such a way that we're able to share that message and that word? I have a pre-existing copy right here, When Women Pray, and every time I hold it up, I get inundated with people from Nigeria saying, I live in Nigeria, how do I get this book? Why can't I get distribution over there? More distribution, effective distribution. Those sorts of opportunities await us, and film, and television, and music, and theater in all of its capacities. And then there's real estate and retail. All of those things suffer by our separation.
All right, so what do you suggest? What solutions are you proffering to this?
I think it starts small. Trust in any relationship starts small, with a few people who encircle themselves together, who make a commitment together. And that's why I want to host this event. I didn't get to host it this year, but I want to host it next year with a few hundred people from the continent over there, and from the Caribbean, and from the US. And let's sit down and talk to each other and see if we can not wait on our leaders and our countries and our presidents to connect us. See if there's not a way that we cannot connect together amongst ourselves. And where there are presidents who are ready to really sit down and forge ahead, let's bring them to the table too, and let's have a real conversation. See, I believe that any community increases when spiritual leaders and business leaders and elected officials and community activists sit down at the table together. And we might not have everything in common, but the one thing we all have in common is the people. And if we're going to lift the people, we have to lift them in every area, and not just lift them spiritually and leave them hungry financially. We have to lift them in every area. And in order for us to do that, we must forge alliances together if we're going to be successful. If the people don't succeed, then who does the church have? If the people don't succeed, who do the governors govern? If the people don't succeed, who will buy the merchandise? Who will eat the food? Who will grow the crops? The main thing is the people themselves, and our love and our commitment to them. I believe that you can be profitable and still be purposeful. And that's the message. I want to sit down at the table with a few distinguished, and I welcome suggestions of people who are serious about leaving this world better than we found it, and handing something off to our children and our grandchildren that has a better strategy than what was handed to us. And I really want to see that happen. So thank you for giving me that opportunity to add that addendum.